Amen.
So it looks like we're recording. Yes. Welcome to anybody who is here. We are just going to wait a little bit longer and let a few more folks arrive. But please, if you're with us for this wonderful talk today with author Jean Shinoda Bolen, feel free to put your name or where you're from in the chat. That's always interesting to see how many have gathered from how far away. We'll look forward to that. See Austin, Texas. Hello. Canada, Florida. Wow. Welcome, everybody. It's beautiful. All right, I still see people arriving, so I'm just going to wait just a brief moment longer, make sure people can get settled. And as you see, there's so many people from all over the world, Brazil, and Canada, California, Scotland. Welcome, everybody. Okay. Well, looks like we've leveled off a little in participants. So here we are. Thanks, everybody. My name is Kristen Wildenby, and I am a Global Read Coordinator with the Charter for Compassion. Welcome to today's program with Jean Shinoda Bolen, who will be discussing her book, Like a Tree, How Trees, Women, and Tree People Can Save the Planet. Today's program is sponsored by the Sacred Earth Institute, and our host is Kate Trinka. Before I introduce them, allow me to tell you about some other upcoming events and work of the Charter for Compassion, who's bringing you today's program. And I'm going to provide links to all of these programs in the chat. So we're always grateful for your financial support so we can keep bringing you relevant programming. If you are interested in sponsoring an upcoming global read, you can contact Kate, and I'll put her email in the chat. We have several upcoming courses that are hosted by the Charter's Education Institute, including a Spanish language session of the course Compassion Integrity Training, and the course Growing Whole, Not Old, and a course on mindfully reconnecting with the natural world. And I'm going to mention a campaign that may be near to your heart since you're on this call today. It's called the Compassion Tree Project. This is an effort to bring awareness to the need for regenerative efforts around the world. The ambitious 10-year goal is to plant 7.7 billion trees, in effect, a tree for every person on the planet. There's more information about that project on the Charter for Compassion's website. And again, I'll put a link in the chat. So next month, on July 15th, we'll be visiting with Joanna Macy for the Global Read, and she'll be discussing her book, A Wild Love for the World and the Work of Our Time. Michael Nagler will be with us in August, discussing his book, The Third Harmony, Nonviolence and the New Story of Human Nature. Billy Collins, a two-time U.S. Poet Laureate, will be with us on September 11th, reading his poetry, including The Names, to commemorate the anniversary of 9/11. Susan Salzberg will be with us in September, Brianne Eisler in October, Robin Wall Kimmerer in November, and the poet Naomi Nye in December. So we're grateful these amazing authors have connected with the Charter for Compassion and are willing to donate their time to us. So please help spread the word about these upcoming reads. And so I encourage you to participate in today's discussion. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'll be monitoring those and help feed them into the discussion towards the end. If you see the chat button, it's usually at the bottom of your screen. And like I said, put questions in there, and I'll be keeping track of those. So now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our host for today's program, Kate Trinka. Kate is a writer, educator, and a small business owner, and is now enjoying semi-retirement following her 26-year career as a public school teacher. She's the author of many poems, including Beyond the Fog, and just released the second edition of her first book, If These Trees Could Talk, Part 1, Messages from the Trees of Sunset Park. Kate has also begun leading workshops around her latest work, Our Sensible Nature, Mindful Reconnecting with Nature Activity Cards, which provides nature-inspired activities connecting us to various themes in nature, as well as to our 54 natural senses, sensitivities. Kate is the founder of the Sacred Earth Institute, whose purpose is to provide learning opportunities which help to connect people to the inherent power of the natural world and subsequently to their authentic selves. Kate has a bachelor's and master's degree in education, and she is finishing her doctorate in eco-psychology. Welcome to Kate. And finally, the reason you're all here to talk about the book Like a Tree with Jean Shinoda Bolen. So Jean Shinoda Bolen, MD, is a psychiatrist, a Jungian analyst, an internationally known speaker, and author of 13 influential books in over 100 foreign editions. The Tao of Psychology, Goddesses in Every Woman, Gods in Every Man, Ring of Power, Crossing to Avalon, Close to the Bone, Goddesses in Older Women, Crones Don't Cry, and Crows Don't Whine, excuse me, The Millionth Circle, Like a Tree, Urgent Message from Mother, Moving Toward the Millionth Circle, and Artemis, the Indomitable Spirit in Every Woman. She is a Distinguished Life Fellow of the American Psychiatric Association, a past clinical professor of psychiatry, the University of California, San Francisco, and a former board member of the Ms. Foundation for Women, the Association for Transpersonal Psychology, and the C.G. Jung Institute of San Francisco. She is a leading advocate for the 5th World Conference on Women, India 2022. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here, Jean. And for anybody that just joined while I was introducing them, I'll just repeat, if you have any questions for our guests today, please put them in the chat, and I'll be sending them through later in the program. Thanks everyone for being here, and I'll turn it over to Kate.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Kristen. Thanks for being here with us this morning. Jean, I'm so thrilled to be here talking with you today about your book, Like a Tree, How Trees, Women, and Tree People Can Save the Planet. And obviously, like you, I'm a tree person. How did you, I mean, let's just start out with the big question. How did you come to write this incredible book?
Before I answer that, I wanted to sound my Tibetan bowl, because I envision that everyone who's listening and us are in a circle. And I will I will sound the bowl, and it'll go out across the continent, because you've got a lot of Canadians on as well as Americans, and will be linked at the heart chakra. I live in the part of California that is filled with trees. It's Marin County, and I live right over the hill from Muir Woods. So there are trees all around, and I live in a homeowners association where a beautiful Monterey pine used to be in front of my house. In fact, I saw the Monterey pine before I walked down the path and into the house itself. And I was living there for a couple of years when a neighbor, after putting in windows on the side, wanted the tree removed because of it was well, I thought of it as a view, and we all had straight on views of the Bay Area. Now the side view, the new side view, had a tree in front of it. And so she lobbied the homeowners association to have the tree cut down. And, you know, I struggled with that and as a political person around for the tree's sake. And it was clear after a year of lobbying that I was on the losing end. And I thought as an activist, I could have tied myself to the tree and made a PR fuss in the local newspaper or something. But for me, home is sanctuary. Home is, I don't want to put all that kind of energy in front of my house. So I left for the United Nations in New York, knowing that when I came back, the tree would be cut down. And I had invited Gloria Steinem to be on a panel at the UN NGO CS Commission on the Status of Women. And she's an old friend from way back. And I told her my sad story when I got there and said, you know, when I come home, the tree will be down. And she said, remember, Jean, you're a writer. You can have the last word. That was spirit bring. That raised my spirit. I came back and saw the stump where the tree was. And for quite a while, every time I saw the stump, I either got sad or I got angry. But I also started to write. And as I started to write, it got transformed into what became the book, Like a Tree. And I learned a lot about trees. You know, if you go to medical school, you don't do botany, you do physiology, and you do anatomy, and you do a lot of things that have to do with human beings. So I was a self-taught student learning about trees and the differences between trees and among trees and all the stuff that I had not been exposed to before. And then there's something about when you are moved to learn something new and you can bring together mythology and you can bring together botany and you can bring together all kinds of things, that as the book progressed, I was very much into writing it and the synchronicities of people telling me stories right in the middle of it, of my writing. And that's true too. If you start going out as an activist from a heart standpoint, chances are, if you'll attend to what comes your way, you're given what you need in terms of information, and then you follow certain leads and you're into it. And that's what happened and how the book got easily written, actually. And then when the book was published, the first book signing was right outside of Muir Woods. And so I signed the books out of Muir Woods, and at the visitor center there, or at the gift center there, they have these marvelous carvings out of big redwoods that had come down. And there was this wonderful 3-foot tall bear cub. And so when I finished the book signing, I asked that the staff there with their truck follow me home and put the bear cub on the stump. So now whenever I walk by the stump, I see this bear cub and it always makes me smile. So the combination of events has led to a book, has led to a sculpture on my stump. And truly it has been a affirmation of so many different things, of trees, of synchronicity, of what, if you set out as an activist from a heart standpoint, how things can come together. So I just, and then out of the blue, you invited me to speak on Like a Tree. I mean, I've been out in the world either speaking about archetypes like goddesses in every woman and things like that, or once I went to the UN, I got all involved with circles, so the millionth circle, moving toward the millionth circle, gather the women, save the world, etc. And so my book Like a Tree was sort of an orphan and that it didn't fit into the categories of that I had written much about. And then lo and behold, as we are sheltered in place, as the skies are becoming blue all over the globe, as the trees are having a chance to breathe again, you invite me to speak on my book. So I had to go back and read it over again to remember what I put in it. And I am just delighted to be able to talk about Like a Tree.
I'm so glad that you're here. And I think what you just said is perfect in terms of, you know, our assignments and the synchronicity. And then one of the things I just loved the word that the concept that you called it, an assignment. And do you want to talk about that and the three questions that you, because this all fits in together with what you just said, you know, like when the tree came down and you know, the person said, well, you're a writer, you get to say the last word. And because you were, you know, following your heart, you were, and when you do that, you're in synchronicity with the world and the universe, and you've completely obviously identified what your assignment is in the world. Could you talk about assignments?
Well, an assignment, you know, when you think about an assignment, you think back to the days when you were in school and the teacher gave you an assignment, and whether you liked it or not, you had to do it. Well, I think about assignment as a totally from the inside out. And heeding an assignment is listening to your own heart area. And when you are moved to take on something, there are three questions that only can be answered from inside. And the first one is always, is this meaningful to you? And lots of things are meaningful, lots of things are important. There are causes all over the place. But is this particular one meaningful to you? And when it came down to my tree was cut down, and I started to get involved in knowing about trees and what they do for human beings and all. And as I began to realize that to support the trees, how trees, women, and tree people can save the planet. I mean, pretty big activism kind of sometimes. So is it meaningful to do this book or anything that I do? One, is it meaningful? Second is one that has to do with, will it be fun? And it doesn't mean that it won't be hard work. It doesn't mean that there will be a real need to persevere. But it's fun if you find yourself involved in something where you have kindred spirits also with you in this. It's fun when you do something with people and find that you have a heart connection. You have a sense of being in a circle where you have a sense that there are others with you on this, and you're not by yourself doing this one-woman show. I mean, really, the heroine model is so different from the hero model. The hero model is, you know, you go out into the world and it's one person taking on the world. The heroine model is something happens and you are responding to it. That you didn't choose to have the circumstance in which you would now become an advocate for something. I didn't expect I didn't expect anybody would want to cut this beautiful 40-year-old tree down. The tree I saw before I saw the house and thought, it's a beautiful tree. Well, I did learn there's a difference between people who love trees and people who don't. And that's why I bring people up into, their tree people are not tree people. And most of the masculine world are not tree people. Those who think about a tree as so many lumber per foot or something like that. So the sense of you get involved with something and it turns out to be fun because you do it with people who share some sense of meaning with you, and you can cry and laugh a lot. Your triumphs are not singular hero tasks, and you know, there is a heroine that that responds to what was untoward circumstance and pushed on, and it's just a different story. the heroine versus the hero. And the heroine takes on something that what she didn't choose. It happens to be what happened. And she could have been bitter, she could have been angry, she could have been given up, whatever the cause was. But once she committed to going and doing something about something that mattered, then she finds that there are allies, and she finds also that it's a soul experience too, to take on something that's meaningful at the heart level. So meaningful, fun, because you are doing it with other people who share your values. And the last one is it's motivated by love. It's not motivated by, I mean, you have to be, if you're an activist, you have to be angry about what's going down. I mean, you just can't be blasé about it or just objective at a distance. You do really care. I mean, it matters to you, but it matters because you love what is being trashed or treated badly, whether it's a tree or values or other animals or children or something. You have to, if you're motivated by love for what it is you want to save, then it's still up to you to say, yes, I volunteer, I will take it on. And so the three questions are, is it meaningful? Will it be fun? And is it motivated by love? And if anyone is out there thinking that they want to take on something that matters, lots of people will tell you what it is you should be doing, but really, from inside out, what motivates you?
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Thanks for elaborating on that. That's amazing. You know, I love this. I love the titles of the chapters. You know, standing like a tree, giving like a tree, surviving like a tree, sacred like a tree. Just beautiful. And I know both of us are really interested in the sacred and part of that, and the symbolic and the soulful piece of this. So. But I don't want to skip over the idea when, and you just talked about the heroine piece, how, you know, and it's part of the title, how women can save the planet. You talked about the sort of the correlation between Mother Earth and our Earth mothers. Could you like elaborate on that with regard to you know, women and the umbilical cord and how that all ties?
Well, one of the reasons that I think that it's coming up now is that we're sheltering in place. We have time to reflect, and if we're lucky enough to live where there are some beautiful trees, when we go out to walk still where there are trees, we also maintain distance. And so we're not chattering. We're actually out walking among trees, and we actually are seeing them. And as soon as we start to do that, we remember something of how we explored things as children, to go out and walk around trees and marvel at them. This is what a kid naturally does. And there's an inner child in every single grown-up. Sometimes she's been so suppressed that you hardly hear from her. But if you do go out and walk by yourself, even though you're walking with someone 6 feet apart or something, and you're not chattering, but you're really looking at things, you really start to connect with what is around you. And that puts you in touch with some part of yourself that connects with things like this. And I find that when we go out and feel our way into the world, respond with feelings and not just staying in our own mind, going over our own dramas and things, it really does make a difference. I think I just went off a little bit on around the curve and around the bend here. So I need to come back to your question.
So basically, you had made the analogy about Earth mothers, like,
Oh,
and
right,
and
right,
biblical
right.
Earth.
Because
And
what the activism with the planet being what it's like, with the fact is that there's global warming. The Earth is is warming up. The seas are rising because the ice at both poles are melting. And the air, and there's too much carbon dioxide in the air because there are too many people breathing it out. And there are too many trees being cut down. Every time the trees are the lungs of the planet. And every time the Amazon forest is currently being cut down at a faster rate than it has been forever, the trees that are the arboreal trees around Canada and the top of Russia and all, the trees are being cut down to make whatever, everything from toilet paper to houses. The trees are being cut down with no consideration for the fact that we breathe out carbon dioxide. The trees take it in, sequester it to make more of their bark, and it breathes out through their leaves the oxygen that we take in. That we and trees are intimately linked together. But for the trees, we wouldn't have the oxygen to breathe. So the more we cut down the trees, the more we have less oxygen in the air, the more we reproduce because we don't have choice, because the women's right to choose is still being challenged within the United States and all over the world. If women cannot choose whether they're going to have children or not, if we don't have control over our own bodies, then more and more people are made by women who might not even want to be mothers, but had no choice to be mothers. And women who really want to be mothers have to have, in many parts of the world, child after child after child. So we have too many children, too many people in the world, not enough to get educated and well taken care of. And then the trees keep being cut down. So how, as we look at our beautiful planet and we see, you know, I remember, I think it was in 1968, when the first Apollo astronauts went out in space, and they sent back the picture, square picture, because after all, that's what happens within a square, is a photograph, square photograph, the center of which is this beautiful blue marble, as they call it, the planet Earth, our mother, the Earth. For the first time, we saw Earth from outer space. And we are then, like children have grown to become adults enough to look at our own mothers and see our own mothers as separate people. And by the time we see them as separate people, they're older. And we realize they're also vulnerable. And we begin to realize that we have a bond, reciprocal bond, to do some caretaking of our mothers. Now, up until we see ourselves separate from our mothers, our mother is just an extension of our own needs, and she is either is good at it or she's not. And so we think about mom as long as we are children, and there are a lot of adults who are children, but as long as we are children, we look upon our mothers about what she did for us or what she didn't do for us. And that's one of the things that help women and men who come into therapy to grow up, is to start to, first of all, there's often a need to talk about the painful elements in childhood in order to share them and to grow through them, and then start to look at backwards, not as one experienced it as a child, but who our mothers were. And often our mothers were very young women, and they didn't really know how to do mother very well. Lots of mothers fail because they aren't grown-ups themselves. Well, as we grow older, we begin to see our mothers as imperfect. Well, before we could have been very angry at them because of their imperfections. And as soon as we can see ourselves separate from our mothers, we have grown up quite a bit. And we can see her separately, and we can see what she needs and how it was that she helped us. And we just have a grown-up perspective. Well, when we saw Earth from outer space, up until then, the Earth is what we just take for granted. You know, we cut down our trees, we use her up, which a lot of and real mothers do get used up taking care of kids for that matter. But here we are. We see Earth from outer space, and the other thing was that she was beautiful. That quality of she is beautiful, and she's a mandala. A mandala is, you know, the Tibetans, almost all of their sacred hangings are in the shape of a mandala. There's a circle in a rectangle or a square. And that's how we first saw our Mother, the Earth, from outer space. We saw her, this beautiful blue planet, against the dark space. We don't have neighbors that we could see. We have our Mother, the Earth, and we are dependent on her. So why do we treat her so badly? It's because we're not grown up. Human beings are not grown-ups. The other thing is that we have come to almost a full stop during the coronavirus. Shelter in place, lockdowns happening all over the world. And for the first time, people in India can see the Himalayas from their cities. Because there's so many people in India and in China, and there's so much smog over the cities, it was impossible to see through them to the sky, to the mountains in the distance. And during lockdown, suddenly the sky is clearing. It's becoming blue again all over. We've now seen pictures before and after over the big cities. And we're beginning to see our Mother, the Earth, in her beauty again, because we have polluted the skies. So we are in this in-between place. The word is liminal. It's like we cannot go back to where we were. That was then. We don't know how we're going to get through this liminal place, which is a Latin word for threshold. It's like being on a threshold between where we were and where we might be next. But in the meantime, we are here. And what we do here right now as human beings will make all the difference as to what will happen next. And each of us has a place to make a difference. And you mentioned about the tree project at the beginning, where over 1 billion trees, or 1 tree per person, like 7 point something billion trees, and because to match the number of people, is a project. And I remember listening to Jane Goodall talk about this other 1 billion tree project. So there, all over the world, there are people that are recognizing the need to plant trees. And that's very promising. That feels as if a number of people have picked up the assignment of taking care of Mother Earth. And when you think about how the trees take the carbon we breathe out, sequester it, and change it, and transform the gases in the world into oxygen that we can breathe. The trees are to us, in effect, like the umbilical cord is to the fetus inside the mother. In the 9 months that most fetuses, children about to be, are in their mother's womb, the umbilical cord brings in the oxygen and takes away the waste. It's the same thing as what the trees do for what we breathe out and what they give out so for us to breathe. So we are dependent on the trees. And we, interestingly, it is women who are the carriers of not only children, but when it comes down to a certain level of activism, of taking care of nurturing, of seeing the need not to have power over, but to take care of. That's the feminine aspect in some men, and the major quality that most women have, a natural kind of nurturing, being more open to sharing. Because one of the things that makes most women's groups flow into circles easily enough is that women, for women's friendships, one has to share secrets or vulnerabilities or meanings or whatever, and we share ourselves in order to be a friend. So many, as soon as you get into the power mindedness of patriarchy, and some women as well, then dominate the other person is the issue. You don't share you don't talk about vulnerabilities. You get allegiances from lesser people. I mean, when you watch how people are afraid to speak up to our president, who currently punishes staff people at the cabinet level who speak up against. You see what happens back in junior high school and high school with and even before then. To get along, you have to go along if you're a guy. That's not what most women do. Most women learn to get along, you have to share vulnerabilities. It's so different. And so if this planet, if Mother Earth is to survive, thrive, not just survive, but thrive, I really think it's up to women and trees. And together, I think we have a good chance.
I love that. I do too. And that also reminds me of something that you wrote. And I'm going to quote you here. Every young person who does something for the environment, who loves the beauty of nature or even just one tree, or has felt a connection with the universe out under the stars, may make a difference. So I think youth is really critical, and that was something that you mentioned in your Giving Like a Tree section of the book.
Also, I think that girls that went off to Girl Scout camps or Girl Guide camps or usually girls can be sent off to camp. And the ones who have an Artemis, who have a love of nature, who like to be out among the trees, and who like to explore things, they may be sent away to camp the first time, but after that, they want to go to camp. And so I think that any woman who's listening now, who can remember back to liking summer camp and looking at the stars and being moved by the beauty of the Milky Way. I mean, one of the things is, with 7-point-something billion people and all the pollution, who can see the stars these days? I mean, it's a privilege to be able to go away to camp and see the stars and be among trees and have national forests and things like that. I mean, we have those things. And if by chance, when you were a kid, you went off to camp and now you are remembering what it was like to sleep under the stars and to share stories and to be yourself, not how you dress and whatever, but up in camp, you get usually kind of grubby. And there's a kind of a quality of being much closer to nature when you're up at most camps. I realize there are lots of other camps these days that are pre-academic camps and are really extensions of what you're expected to be. But who are you when you are being yourself? See, partly as a Jungian analyst, the whole idea of the questions of who are we really? What did we come here to do? I mean, when you think about an assignment in terms of your overall life, what did you learn from the suffering that you went through? You can't get No human being can get through life scot-free of suffering. It's what you do with it. Do you become bitter and angry, compare yourself to someone who had it better, or do you learn through your own suffering what other people who suffer a lot more than you go through? Do you feel, are like the wounds you have felt, do they deepen your compassion and make you want to make things better around you? So anybody who, either because of a love of beauty or because they recognize what suffering is like and they are grateful for who they have become, becomes much more a living out one's personal, call it a myth, or call it a, when you're on your own path, the path that you were meant to go on because life circumstance gave you both the gifts and the problems that you got through, at that point, you begin to recognize that you are becoming who you were meant to be, not who someone else expected you to be. First half of life, you kind of try to become who you were, acceptable, approved on, etc., approved, etc. But at a certain point, there's an awareness of what is it that you love to do because you are living who you are. And that's when you, for one thing, lose track of time. If you are doing something that you truly love to do, you may spend hours at some task that someone else would go crazy having to do it, but you love it. And then you realize that this is a gift and you love being yourself doing it. And so sometimes it's only until the second half of life do you have the opportunity to make choices like that. And each of us who makes there's the ripple out effect. When you are motivated to do something that's meaningful and work and fun and motivated by love, you will affect something and it will ripple out more. I like to speak about love as the only thing that isn't zero sum. Everything else, if I give you money, if I give you food, if I give you a piece of clothing, whatever I give you, you have it now and I have less of it, except love. Love is the only thing that if I give you love or a project love or an animal love or a tree love, if I love something, what I give away, it's amazing, but it's the only thing that the more I give away, the more there is, because I still have it. In fact, when you give love away, you have more of it and you've given more of it away. So it's the only zero sum energy there is in the universe, love. And when your activism for trees or whatever it is motivated by love, you are doing, you're carrying out an assignment. It's meaningful to you. And you're also increasing the love. So it's good to be an activist from the heart. Absolutely good.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. That is so beautiful, the whole love thing, and tying that into action. One of the things that you said in your book was each action is a choice that contributes toward a critical mass in bringing about change in collective thinking. And this idea of love transforming the world, and that it's the one thing that just keeps expanding versus retracting. It's the zero sum that you mentioned is just amazing.
Because there is truly abundance versus scarcity, and people who become miserly about caring about anything just shrivel inside. There really is something to putting your heart into something, and only you know what it is that you lose track of time when you do it, because you are being yourself doing it, which means that it, whatever it is, however, and it doesn't matter if it's measured by outside forces, If you are doing something and you lose track of time and you are aware that you love what is you're doing, what it is you're doing, then that part of you expands. And one of the things that I'm seeing in this lockdown, sheltering in place, and through the virtual circles. I mean, we are in a virtual circle now with everyone who's tuned in. And a virtual circle at the heart level is the same as being in, and not this, it's not the same, but it has a similar energy to being in a circle with that you meet regularly with, which we can't do right now. But when you are in a circle, and there are more and more Zoom circles, and I had written the Millionth Circle, How to Change Ourselves in the World, and women have a more natural tendency to be in circles where everyone faces each other. It isn't dominator, there isn't somebody in charge of the group. It isn't like the star and the underlings, but it is like everybody is in a circle. And on a Zoom circle, when the children speak up, they're the ones who are speaking. Everyone has their own moment. No one dominates like they do in offices, like they do in governments, like they do in patriarchy, period. What's happening now in this lockdown time is more, through virtual ways, is more and more circles are forming. And the circle versus hierarchy is a difference between power over patriarchy and the feminine model of being connected in circles. And when you connect in a circle, you speak from the heart and you start changing the culture around you. So that's a quiet activism. It's not a demonstrating activism at all. But I'm beginning to wonder, might we reach the metaphoric million circle, which is the one that tips the scales, the one that when it arrives, it's like when women suffered for all the years they suffered to get us the right to vote. And once we got the right to vote, people like me, when I first got the right to vote, I sort of thought, well, haven't we always had the right to vote? This is what we do now, right? Only to learn about the women who put themselves out, got arrested, were force-fed, etc., for years so that we could have the right to vote. Well, the same thing will happen when we reach the millionth circle. Circle rather than hierarchy will be the model. And it just would be natural. Haven't we always sort of valued circles and haven't been in balance with hierarchy? Haven't male and female always been equal? Well, no, but now, future kids, now we are equal.
May it be so. May it be so. Thank you so much, Jean. I'm going to open this up to our facilitator, Kristen, who I'm assuming has tons of questions from our audience, or at least some. So I'm going to let her take it from here.
Great. Yes, some nice questions from the audience. I'm going to begin with this one, Jean, from Kathleen. And she says, thank you for the metaphor regarding our relationships with our mothers and our relationships with Mother Earth. We can heal the brokenness in the relationship with Mother Earth, and we have to do the work not only for ourselves. And here's the question. Do we have to do the work not only for ourselves, but for those who refuse to heal their relationship with Mother Earth? Do you agree, or how does that fit in? Doing the work for yourself, but then maybe doing the work on behalf of others. Is that possible?
It's very much possible, because it's the activists always. There's been change in culture because some people have had a vision that has been well motivated to change something, and with the focus and the energy, and also calling upon. I mean, I am a feminist activist, but I'm also a spiritual activist. I believe that there is an invisible energy as well as the active energy that means that that if we spend some time being quiet, walking among the trees or meditating or something, if we have a sense of the power of meditation and the power of prayer, the power of calling upon the invisible world, that there is an invisible world. You don't have to be a mystic like I am, but anybody who has a sense of mystical qualities thinks about there being an other side, that there are, and I really loved, let's see, there was a movie, a Pixar movie called Coco, and it talked about a little boy who wanted to become who he was meant to be, which was an artist. The family was dead set against it. It was about that. It was also about this middle place in between, where people who had died were spirits on the other side, and it was a Mexican-Spanish based story. Coco was. It also won an Academy Award. So it's a really good film. And on the Day of the Dead, you know, in Mexico, there's an assumption they lay out food and things for the folks on the other side to come over on the Day of the Dead. So it had that in it. There was a sense that when you were in this in-between place, that you cared about what was happening with the people that you loved that were on this side, on the side of animated life. They were in the middle zone. And as long as they were remembered, they were there. And then as soon as time goes on and they're forgotten, it's like that period ends and they go somewhere else. We don't know where. But anyway, just the whole idea. I love that that there would be such a thing as a Pixar animated film that was really talking about something quite deeper. And that deeper being what people do when they are in real difficulties and don't know what. I mean, it's sort of like they used to say in wars that there are no atheists in the foxholes way back when, because when you really know that you could be dead any moment, prayer is a rather natural thing, and the veils are thinner and things like that. So as I have gotten more me, I think one of the things we do as we get older is you become more who you really are. So as I get to be older, what I do is I've gotten more expressive about my weirder side being the sense of the other side, the sense that we each have a soul, which I've always felt from the beginning, but that there's a connection with the invisible world that will not interfere unless you invite them to. So I would say that when you are in a circle, that one of the things that is always useful to do is to connect at the heart level, but also to spend some time in silence, where whatever you were raised with, you know, there's so much theology involved in who you pray to and all that, but when you know that there's some energy that is beyond the human one, that's a divine-ish energy. And you go to Egypt, which I did at the beginning of this year, and you see these gods and goddesses that were worshipped 4,000 years ago. Some with the head of a crocodile, some with the head of other things, a lioness. And you realize that back in the day, for a millennium, people prayed to gods that were represented by this kind of statuary. And so what I gathered is that human beings have always had an accessibility to the invisible world, always. But we've prayed to all kinds of weird and strange and divinities. And we've also had all kinds of different rituals and whatever. But going back to when cave people made paintings to their, you know, artistry and divinity, there's something about human beings that make us different than any other species. And one is our connection to this invisible world. And so if you're going out to save a tree or a person, if your activism is motivated by, it's meaningful to you because you know something, you love something, and you go out and you make a difference, there's something about living out the path you came to live out. The sense of, okay, you had the childhood you had, and it was not easy, or maybe you had too easy a childhood. Well, what are you going to do from that? You know, this is the choices along the way. Over and over again, we are given choices to follow what's inside ourselves that says this is right, that is wrong for us. And depending on what choices we make at the crossroad, we become who we were meant to be, or we become less and less who we were meant to be, and more a kind of persona. We wear our false face into the world, and underneath it, we're depressed, because you are not depressed when you're doing something meaningful, when you care about what you are trying to raise or to be, really. We're almost out of time. And I realized that we had planned to shut down on the hour, but to stay open to the questions. And what I wanted to do was since I just talked about silence, is to sound my Tibetan bowl one more time and have the entire group that is circled, that linked at the heart level, now be together one more time. And as you are in silence and you are you're feeling the reverberations, the vibrations of the bell, let something, be open to letting something come up in your psyche, in your heart, in your mind, that reminds you deeply of something that matters to you.
Okay, we will be stopping the recording here, but if anybody would like to stay on and extend the conversation for about 15 more minutes, we're happy to stay on with you, and Jean has agreed to do that. Thank you so much for being here.